This is the haunting last photo that was ever taken of 12-year-old Jared Negrete. In July of 1991, Jared went on his first ever overnight Boy Scouts camping trip to the San Bernardino Mountains. On July 19th, the troop and their leader were hiking to the summit of San Gorgonio Mountain when Jared got tired and fell behind. The leader told Jared to stay behind and wait while they finished the hike, but at around 6 p.m., another group of hikers saw Jared cutting through the switchbacks on his way down the trail. Once at the top of the summit, the hikers notified the scout leader about what they'd seen, and the leader said he would pick Jared up on the way back down, but it was too late. Jared was nowhere to be found. An extensive search was launched, and on day 3, a shoe print matching Jared's was found at around 10,000 feet in the San Gorgonio wilderness. Authorities soon found his backpack, which contained beef jerky and some candy wrappers, and eventually, Jared's camera was found. On the film roll were 12 photos, mostly of the scenery taken before he disappeared. But the last photo was of Jared's eyes and nose, presumably taken with the flash on at night after he disappeared. It's believed he took the photo himself, but nothing has been proven. The search lasted for 19 days, but no trace of Jared has ever been found. If you live in Utah, please keep your eyes open for this little boy. This is 13-year-old William McCoy, and he went missing on August 19th. Not a lot of details have been released to the public since this is an active investigation, but I spoke with his mom Andrea, who confirmed the main details. So on August 19th, William, who likes to go by Whiplash, was dropped off at Hurricane Middle School in Hurricane, Utah. He was last seen at 7:55 that morning at the school, but shortly after, he was removed from school property by at least 2 adults, and he was then seen getting into a black Honda Ridgeline truck. We don't have any security footage of this, so this is just a general picture of that kind of truck just for your reference. Now after this, he completely vanished, but according to local police, he's considered a runaway. So as of today, over a week later, no Amber Alert has been issued. He's considered a runaway, but at the same time, at least as far as we the public know, the adults that helped him run away have yet to be identified, which is really scary to think about. Police believe that he could possibly be in Cedar City or Washington County, and they don't know if he's still with those adults or on his own now hiding out somewhere. Regardless, Cedar City police have stated that anyone in the area should keep their eyes peeled for a black Honda Ridgeline truck. The family stated that for legal reasons and for William's protection, they aren't allowed to release any more information about the situation. A search was just conducted Tuesday night in Cedar City, but sadly it didn't turn up anything. These are some of William's characteristics and what he was last seen wearing. If you have any information about his whereabouts, please contact the number on the screen.
These are pictures that'll make you feel uneasy, part 3. Up first is a picture of all the blood vessels in your head. This is absolutely weird to look at, especially because this is what the underneath of our skin looks like. Just imagine if humans walked around looking like this 24/7. Next up, we all know sharks are already terrifying, but this is a picture showing the bottom of a shark, and it gives a whole new meaning to terrifying. This picture just made me 10 times more scared of sharks because why do they have this creepy face underneath them? Next up is a picture of a beehive built on a statue's head. Now, this looks like some sort of creature out of an alien movie, and that's what makes it so unsettling. Just imagine walking through the woods and seeing this. You'll think it's some sort of extraterrestrial creature. Next up is a picture of an abandoned hospital with a random light on one of the top floors. Nobody has been in this building for years, and to this day, no one has any clue of what this light was or who caused it. Next are tree roots that look exactly like a human being. Just imagine walking through the woods and seeing this on the ground. I would instantly think it's a human. Finally, these 2 friends were driving down a dark, lonely road one night when they suddenly came across this. It's planks with a bunch of nails on them. Whoever put this on the road definitely has sinister plans for whoever hits it. And luckily, these 2 friends turned around immediately. These are active serial killers who haven't been caught yet, part 1. Up first is the I-70 killer. The I-70 killer is an unidentified American man who killed 6 store clerks across the Midwest in 1992. Victims were typically young women who were petite and brunette. The one male victim had long brown hair which he often wore in a ponytail, so it is theorized that this killer mistook him for a woman from a distance. Also, the I-70 killer is suspected to be behind 2 more murders in 1993, an attempted murder in 1994, and 1 more in 2001. His only surviving victim is 35-year-old Vicky Webb. She briefly talked to him before he shot her, but he just left her there for dead, and the bullet didn't properly penetrate her, and she survived. Next up is the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Craigslist Ripper. This person is believed to be active from 1996 to 2010. Authorities came to this conclusion after 10 bodies were found on the Long Island coast between 2010 and 2011. There are 8 other potential victims, some of whom have never been identified. Most of the victims were known to sell adult services on Craigslist. And several people have been suspected of being the Long Island serial killer. Like this man, John Bitrolf. He has been charged with 2 confirmed murders, but is suspected for another 15 to 20, making him the #1 suspect of being the Long Island serial killer.
This girl, her name was Stephanie Melgoza, and she's also known as a car crash cackler. She was out drinking. She was driving a little too reckless. Was going like 80, 90 miles per hour, bro, and like fucking local streets. Ends up hitting 2 people, Andrea Roswick and Paul Prowent. Cops get there, and there's body cam footage of everything going on. But basically, she's drunk as, and the body cam footage, the cop, he looks down, he's like, what the fuck is that? And it was like legs and bro. There's fucking body parts everywhere. And the reason why they call her the car crash cackler.
So she was laughing about this whole situation?
She was so fucking drunk to the point that she was laughing. She was 3 times drunk than like what legal limit is.
Oh my gosh.
Cop is like telling her, yo, like follow the light,
and she's
didn't. Like they obviously detain her. They take her to the hospital. They want to make sure she's okay. So in the hospital and stuff, she's just saying stupid oh, when am I gonna go back to school?
You're going to jail for reckless homicide tonight. You're going to jail for aggravated DUI for killing 2 people. So no, you're not going to school tomorrow. You're not getting your car out of impound. Did you just hear what I just told you?
You said I'm not going tomorrow. I'm talking about Tuesday.
Did you hear when I said that
I'm going to jail tomorrow.
You're going to jail when we're done here?
Yes.
Did you understand what I told that you killed 2 people tonight?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering when I can go to school.
Okay, we're done.
And you know what's crazy, bro? When she was on bail, when she was waiting for her trial, she got married, she got pregnant or something.
So she was basically enjoying her life. Worst possible ways that you could die.
On some 1,000 ways to die.
Back in 2019 in Iowa, there was this supermarket. Keep in mind, this supermarket has been abandoned for like 3 years. So these contractors pull up, they're gonna obviously renovate it, and then one of the workers goes to the back of the market, and then as he's removing one of the units, a corpse falls out from the back. The way the corpse looked had very dark flesh, and it had like flaky skin, and they obviously called the police. One of the officers remembers about a missing persons report back in 2009. Clothes that the corpse was wearing, it was identical to the missing person, and tracked it down to
Larry Eli Murillo Moncada. And that exact day, his parents report him like saying that he left the house very angry. He had no extra clothes, no shoes. I don't even think he had socks on. He ended up going to his job. He went to the spot where everybody in the job knew, like, if you wanted a place to hide and shit,
slack off,
stay away from everybody and don't get caught, hide on top of like the fridges and shit. He just ended up fucking slipping and he fell. And no matter how much noise he made, he was never gonna get found because the simple fact that the refrigerators were so fucking loud. Another thing that a lot of people are saying is like, I don't know how they didn't detect the smell.
You know, there's 2 crazy things with that, bro. People did smell it. There was many
reports and shit
of customers saying there's like a nasty smell. It smells like death. And there was a Facebook page where people would complain about that supermarket.
Oh my gosh.
And then also, employees still went on top of there to rest. And they probably did smell it. They probably didn't want to say anything because then at that point they will.
In September of 2011, 2 young men broke into Craig Stockard's home in California. On that day, the robbers were looking for anything valuable in Kevin's house. This all took place in Delhi, California, a town pretty close to Sacramento. These young men searched all of Craig's property, and they eventually ended up in his barn, where they found a number of what they believed were blank CDs. After the 2 young robbers fled the home, Craig called the police himself and reported the robbery. But when the boys returned to their home and began looking at the CDs, they discovered something absolutely disturbing. On those CDs, they discovered CP or CSAM, aka lewd images of minors and, yes, children. Apparently, Craig had stockpiled hundreds of these videos and photos, and this led the robbers to rat on themselves and call the police. Eventually, Craig's home was raided, and yes, he was arrested and imprisoned for possession of CP or CSAM. According to authorities, he had been downloading these images and videos for over 7 years. And it turned out that over 30 of those 50 CDs that the boys stole from Craig's home contained CP or CSAM. And I can't find any clear resolution on this story, but according to what I'm reading online, the 2 burglars who reported Craig never were arrested themselves. So in committing a crime of their own, they busted someone for committing an even worse crime. Kind of strange how that worked out, isn't it?
This is a game show that aired in Peru, right? And it's called the value of truth. And the concept of the show was pretty simple to follow. Contestants would be asked a series of questions while being connected to a polygraph test. The more questions that they answer truthfully,
They got money.
and there's a twist to it too. The contestants will have to be next to loved ones. Answer questions
And they will probably ask questions about
around the loved ones, bro. And then in 2012, when the first episode aired, a 19-year-old girl who starred in it, and her name was Ruth Talia Sayas. She's with her mom, dad, and her boyfriend. The first couple questions, they're pretty easy to answer. She answers them truthfully, and then as the episode keeps going, they get even worse. Like they ask her,
Estás con tu enamorado hasta que llegue alguien mejor.
first like question that f***ed it up, right?
Sí.
¿Trabajas en un nightclub?
Sí.
¿Has aceptado dinero a cambio de tener relaciones sexuales?
they ask her another question and she refuses to answer. She basically ends the game there. And then after the show aired, it was a big hit, got high ratings and stuff. Ruth, she became like a low-key, like a little celebrity in Peru and stuff like that. She was on many interviews on the news, interviewed by other television programs and stuff. And then out of nowhere, she just disappears, bro. 10 days of her friends and family are out looking for her. And then they eventually find her body in the vacant lot, buried and stuff. The main suspect was the boyfriend. And only cause she was on
Antarctica is not what you think. Okay, so we all know Antarctica as this icy land that nobody could visit. And nobody thinks anything else, but what if I told you Antarctica might be the most interesting place on Earth? Antarctica was discovered in 1820, but it was on history maps from hundreds of years ago, shown and described as a lot larger. Ever since the world signed the Antarctic Treaty, the majority of people think they are hiding something in Antarctica and they don't want the public to know. These pictures have also been leaked of structures in Antarctica. This is leading more people to believe that there is some sort of civilization in Antarctica, or still is, and the government is just trying to hide it. But to prove this more, in 1946 there was something called Operation High Jump, where the US supposedly went there to research and to explore Antarctica. But while they were there, the squadron got into a battle with flying saucers. The flying saucers were disabling all of their technology, and the United States was no match against them. The government supposedly covered up this whole battle to the public, and never explained the truth about what really happened. Apparently there is also a leaked video of the Battle of Operation High Jump, and I'm about to show it to you right now.
This is the story of 17-year-old Julianne Kopke, who survived falling 10,000 feet from a plane crash into the Peruvian rainforest, where she then spent 11 days crawling back to civilization. On Christmas Eve 1971, Julianne and her mom boarded Lanza Flight 508 out of Lima, Peru. They were traveling to Pucallpa to visit Julianne's dad, who was working in the Amazon rainforest as a biologist. The flight was only supposed to be an hour long, but about 25 minutes in, pitch black clouds engulfed the plane and they were caught in the middle of a massive thunderstorm. At one point, a lightning bolt struck the motor and the plane broke off into pieces. Julianne says she remembers hearing people scream until all she could hear was the wind before blacking out. Julianne was ripped from the plane, still strapped to her seat, where she then fell 10,000 feet down into the middle of the Peruvian rainforest. She suffered from a broken collarbone, a major concussion, and a gash on her leg and arm. And her eyes were almost completely swollen shut. Julianne then spent 11 days in the rainforest trying to stay alive. She began looking for her mom and instead found a small well. When Julianne was 14, she and her parents, who were both zoologists, briefly lived in Panguana, which is a biological research station in the Amazon rainforest. There she remembered her dad telling her that if she ever saw water, to follow it downstream and she would eventually find civilization. So that's exactly what she did. She spent the majority of the 11 days walking and swimming downstream. On the fourth day, Julianne came across the bodies of 3 other passengers who were still strapped to their seats. One of them was a woman, and after thinking it could be her mom, she slightly moved her and realized that it wasn't. Amongst the bodies, though, was a small bag of candy. This served as her only food source for the rest of the days she was stuck in the forest. During this time, Julianne had to protect herself from wildlife and suffered from severe insect bites and a maggot infestation in her arm. She could also see and hear rescue helicopters above her, but because the forest was so dense, nobody could see her. On the 9th day, Julianne came across a hut and went inside to rest. She was then found by 3 men who lived there. They ended up taking her by boat to a local hospital in a nearby town. There, she was reunited with her dad and even helped authorities locate the plane and recover bodies. Of the 91 people on board, Julianne was the sole survivor. She went on to study biology just like her parents and eventually married. After her dad's passing in 2000, she took over as Panguana's director and main organizer of research expeditions to the station. Julianne also went on to write a memoir titled When I Fell from the Sky. About 2 decades after the incident, she returned to the site of the crash for a documentary about her story, where she stood in front of parts of the wreckage that are still there. She once again sat in seat 19F, like she did the day of the crash.
Do not watch this video if you're home alone. This is the terrifying true story that inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a horrifying film from the 70s. The main character in the film is called Leatherface, and he attacks people and wears a mask out of human skin. But did you know a real-life killer and body snatcher inspired the film? Ed Gein is often referred to as the Butcher of Plainfield. He grew up in a strict household in the 1900s. During his childhood, his older brother Henry passed away. The pair had been playing in a field and burning items until the fire got out of control. The brothers ran away, but Henry was actually then found face down, deceased. Some believe that this was an accidental death, but in light of what would happen in later years, some believe that Ed may have killed him. Ed's mum died shortly after, and he really struggled to come to terms with this. He created a weird shrine in his house, and then things got even weirder. He gained a new disturbing hobby of grave robbing. He would steal parts of dead bodies for himself. He would snatch them and use bits to furnish his house. No one knew the horrors that lay behind the walls of Ed's home. That was until a woman named Bernice Warden disappeared. By this time it was 1957. Now, she owned a shop, and unnervingly, when a member of the public went in to make a purchase, they noticed that there was no shopkeeper in there, the till was open, and there was blood on the floor. It turned out that the last known customer in the shop was Ed. Police showed up to interview him and were horrified by what they found in his home. Bernice's lifeless body was hung by the ankles from the ceiling of the home. She had been decapitated. When they scoured the home for more evidence, they found even more disturbing items. There were accessories in the house made from human skulls, human body parts, even things made from human skin. They also stumbled upon the body of another missing woman. This was Mary Hogan. As they searched throughout the home, they found more and more body parts of more deceased people. Now, Ed admitted to killing both women, but denied any further killings. He insisted that the body parts he'd collected and made furniture out of were body parts from graves that he'd robbed. He was arrested and checked over by a psychiatrist. He was deemed to be criminally insane and was detained indefinitely in psychiatric hospitals. Soon, his chilling fantasy was revealed. He admitted that he wished to create a human suit so that he could become his deceased mother. His murders, along with the horrific dark obsession he had with human bodies and making clothing from them, earned him the nickname later on, the real-life Leatherface.
There's one haunted house that we need to have a discussion about, and it's the Haunted Hill House. This, in my opinion, could be the most haunted place in Texas and is one of the most haunted places in all of America. Now, this house is known to be a home to a demon named Toby, but we're going to talk about that later. First, let's talk about the history. The Hill House itself was supposedly a makeshift hospital in the 1900s, and a number of people died in there while being treated for various diseases. Inside of the home, there were also a couple of murders, including an infamous murder that occurred right here on these stairs. According to the owners, a man named Willie, who ran the brothel back in the day, had a son with one of the prostitutes named Elizabeth. Unfortunately, though, their son was born with Down syndrome, and Willie, eventually becoming frustrated with his son, beat him to death right in the upstairs. He also shot and killed the son's mother, Elizabeth, right here on the stairs. He shot her in the stomach, and her bloodstains are still visible on the stairs to this day. I mean, there's so much history we can cover in this TikTok, but they also have a room in the house where there are dolls hanging from nooses. I'm not kidding. Yeah, it's very, very creepy in there. Some of the past owners even practiced black magic in the house. There is a lot of history to unpack here. I also can't forget to mention that there was another murder in the home when a prostitute murdered her John and then killed herself in a bathtub. The upstairs of the house is home to a demon named Toby, and this picture claims to show him. And we talk about this in my YouTube video. I just spent the night there. It was one of the scariest nights of my life. That full video is available on YouTube now. But yeah, Toby the demon was supposedly conjured by some of the previous homeowners, and yeah, his presence is definitely felt in the upstairs. When we were up there, we were hearing literal growls echoing from the lower floor of the house. We caught all this on camera, and I cannot explain it. It was very, very spooky. The entire upstairs, the attic area where Toby is supposed to live, is just so unbelievably creepy, and it does have these phantom EMF signals that were setting off some of our devices. There's also video footage that's been captured in the Hill House that literally shows an investigator pictured right here being yanked out of the bed. And I'm talking like somebody grabs her ankles and pulls her at full force out of the bed. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. There are also tons of people who have been scratched in this house, scratched so deeply that they actually bled through their shirt. And yeah, this place is just evil. Straight up, it's just evil. If you want to see the full documentary that I made about this house, we spent the entire night there ghost hunting. We interviewed the historian there. He gave us an hour-long tour going through all of the history, covered tons of stuff that I couldn't cover on this TikTok, other deaths and strange things that happened there, including the story of a young boy who was found hanging from a tree outside in the back of the house. That video is on my YouTube channel now, The Paranormal Files. I will warn you, I have had people that watch some of my videos and claim that spirits and energy can travel through the screen. We actually had that happen with a video that we posted a few months ago. It was pretty crazy. Lots of people reported having stuff happen after watching it. So yeah, check it out. Be careful when you check it out. Protect yourself, just in case.
This intern sent her auntie a mysterious message saying she had something important to tell her. Then she vanished into thin air. So who took her and what was the important message? Chandra Levy grew up in California in the 1970s. She was ambitious from a young age and was a great leader. She always knew she wanted a career in either law or in the FBI. In 2000, she moved to Washington, D.C. to pursue a career. She had landed herself an internship with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Everyone thought that this was going to be the start of a long and successful career for Chandra, but unfortunately she wouldn't make it out alive. It wasn't long before Chandra started telling her close friends that she'd started dating a congressman. This was Gary Condit. Now, he was actually married and was much older than Chandra. In April 2001, Chandra completed her internship and was due to graduate. It was then that she called her auntie Zamsky. She got through to her answer phone and left an ominous message. It said she had something important to tell her. A few days later, though, before that something was revealed, she vanished. On the 5th of May, Chandra's dad rang police. He was really worried as he hadn't heard from her in days, which was strange because she was due to fly home. Her dad also told police that she may have been dating Gary. Officers showed up to Chandra's apartment where she had a house phone that stored answer phone messages. There were 2 off Gary asking where she was. Interestingly, her laptop showed that she had been searching for hiking trails and also airlines. Gary was actually brought in by police for questioning, and he did admit to them that he had been dating her. He did, though, say that he had no reason to want to harm her in any way. The investigations continued and searches were completely fruitless. Then, though, a huge tragedy took place in America, the 9/11 attacks. Unfortunately for Chandra and her family in the investigation, this really overshadowed the work that was being done. Everything seemed to slow down. That was until 2002 when a dog walker made a grim discovery. Human remains were in Rock Creek Park. It was determined via dental records that this was Chandra. Her bra, a Walkman, and trainers were also recovered. Her joggers were also found, which had knots tied at the bottom, which some people believe may mean she was restrained. Now, a small amount of DNA was found on her body, and this was obviously collected by police. They deemed the case to be a homicide. They started looking into potential suspects and came across a man named Ingmar. He'd spent time in prison for assaulting women in Rock Creek Park. It transpired that the day Chandra vanished, he had actually not showed up at work. However, the DNA found on Chandra didn't match him. In 2009, though, he was charged with Chandra's murder, and the following year he was found guilty. He was given 60 years in prison. However, there was a final heartbreaking twist in this case. Ingmar actually got a retrial due to issues with the reliability of one witness. The charges were dismissed and he was released. To this day, Chandra's case remains officially unsolved. Psychic chillingly predicted this woman's mysterious death years before it happened. Was this a cold-blooded murder, and was someone hiding the truth? Natalie Wood was destined to be a superstar from a young age. She lived in San Francisco, and her mum Maria was a stage mum, always pushing her to do more and to take auditions and just to be in front of the camera. Now, Maria herself had a meeting with a psychic when she was younger, and she had a chilling prediction for her. The psychic told her her second child would be famous, but she also gave her a chilling warning: beware of dark water. As the psychic predicted, Natalie did grow up to be very well known. She became a professional actress, even nominated for an Oscar when she was a teenager. She was living the high life and even dated Elvis Presley. She was then on and off with a man named Robert Wagner. They married, divorced, and then got married again after a short period of time. They even then went on to have a child together. It was a very rocky relationship, even more so when rumours started spiralling that Natalie might be seeing another man. This was one of her colleagues, Christopher Walken. On the 28th of November 1981, Natalie and her husband invited Christopher on a boat trip with them. The trip would end up being deadly. Now, the exact events of the evening are unknown, but police believe it went something like this. Natalie is thought to have gone to bed on the boat. Her husband claimed that he was up chatting with Christopher and then went to bed too and noticed Natalie wasn't there. She'd seemingly disappeared, and so had a dinghy from the side of the boat. The morning after, the authorities made a terrible discovery. They found 43-year-old Natalie's body floating deceased. She was around a mile away in the water. She was wearing just her nightie and socks. Now, they deemed her death to be an accidental drowning, but suspicions were growing. Her autopsy confirmed she had a mark on her cheek and several bruises all over her body. Some believe that this indicated there'd been a fight. Some people, though, think she got the injuries falling overboard. Things went quiet for years, and then there was a startling revelation in 2011. The captain of the boat, Dennis, admitted that he neglected to tell police a few things about the trip. He said that Natalie's husband accused her multiple times of flirting with Christopher, and it caused a lot of arguments. He said one argument even ended with a glass being thrown at the wall, but he couldn't remember who threw it. He also chillingly claimed that the night Natalie vanished, he overheard a big argument and then suddenly everything went silent. The captain also claimed that Robert had acted suspiciously when he realised that Natalie had vanished. He apparently told the others on board not to call for help because he didn't want to cause a commotion and bring about unnecessary attention. It wasn't until hours later, at around 1:30 in the morning, that he finally raised the alarm. Natalie's family told officers that she was very afraid of the sea and she would never have put herself in the position to be kind of dangling over the edge of the boat where she could have fallen overboard. The case was reopened in 2011 and the death certificate was actually changed. This was from accidental drowning to drowning and undetermined factors. It's reported that although Robert was named as a person of interest, he was never officially classed as a suspect, and he hasn't sort of talked openly in interviews or anything about Natalie's death.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
I bet you didn't know that one of the biggest comedians and actors that played in some of your favorite shows was murdered. Phil Hartman was known for creating Pee-wee Playhouse, he was part of Saturday Night Live, and voiced a few characters in The Simpsons. And Vice TV has put together season 2 of Dark Side of Comedy, which tells the story of one of the most loved comedians and actors in Hollywood. Phil had a rough childhood growing up, but that did not stop him from making people laugh and reaching so much success in his life. He was deeply loved by so many, especially the people who worked on set with him. But unfortunately, Phil's life began crumbling after his third marriage, and everyone close to him began noticing. Vice TV put together an amazing glimpse of Phil's life from the beginning to when he was murdered by his wife. You can watch a new episode of Dark Side of Comedy on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on Vice TV.
This girl was... I was killed by a gunshot to the head because of my reputation as the best rapper of my generation. My name is Jose Dwayne Ricardo Onfroy, and I am XXX Tentacion, also known as X, born on January 23, 1998 in Florida. My father left me at a very young age, so my mother struggled alone to provide for me. I grew up in poverty. At the age of 15, I started writing rap lyrics, discovering my passion. My music often drew inspiration from my life experiences and intense emotions. In 2017, my album 17 brought me fame. But my life was not just about success. I had legal troubles and was even incarcerated several times, but I worked hard to become a better person. Unfortunately, on June 18, 2018, at the age of 20, two masked men approached my car as I was leaving a motorcycle store, and one of them opened fire, leaving behind an unmatched style of music. My premature death in 2018 ended the possibility of seeing how my journey could have further evolved, and I leave behind my son who will never get to know his father.
If you've ever seen this man, you may be cursed. So around 2009, a man by the name of Jacob Fairchild was doing a human experiment in an old insane asylum. The experiment was to see if the subjects could stay awake for an entire month playing a computer game that he designed. But the people that were doing this experiment were not heard from afterwards. Jacob was apparently losing his mind while conducting this experiment. He started wearing a mask covered in eyes, calling himself the Timekeeper. This is an image that a former staff member had drawn of him. Eventually, legend has it, he went so crazy he locked everyone inside the facility and burned it down, killing everyone, including himself. But as the place was burning down, he threw himself over a computer server that had the game on it, and it was the only thing not damaged by the fire. Recently, it's been reported that the game Jacob created has been randomly resurfacing on people's computers. To this day, 2 of the teens that reported playing the game have died, 3 have gone missing, and 1 reported seeing this person upon starting the game. And no one who has ever played the game has won.
This is why you should never eat Pop Rocks again. There was a kid named Jimmy who loved the candy Pop Rocks as so much of us do. He ate them every single day and he was obsessed with every single flavor. One day, Jimmy ate a bunch of packs of Pop Rocks and mixed it with a bunch of soda. After doing this, he complained to his parents that his stomach hurt extremely bad, and they said it was most likely because you ate too much candy today. Jimmy then went to his room and the pain got even worse. He then tried to fall asleep to sleep the pain away. But about 30 minutes later, his parents heard a loud bang coming from his room. They then rushed upstairs and opened his bedroom door. And what they saw made them both scream in absolute horror. There was blood all over the room and Jimmy's body parts were spread out everywhere. They had no idea what happened, so they called doctors and investigators to come over and look at the scene. And they came to a very disturbing conclusion. Because of all the Pop Rocks that Jimmy ate and all the soda he mixed it with, it created a reaction in his stomach and caused his body to completely explode.
In 1912, a young boy went missing. And when he was finally reunited with his mother, it seemed like it was not the same boy. So 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar disappeared by a lake on a family vacation in 1912. The only clue found was his hat, which led many to believe he had been kidnapped. The next year, in 1913, a man is seen traveling with a boy that looks very similar to Bobby. He was arrested, but he insisted the boy was not Bobby. He was a boy named Bruce Anderson. But the police didn't listen and returned the boy to Bobby Dunbar's mother. At first, the mother is not convinced the boy is Bobby Dunbar. But she claims that the boy has similar birthmarks to Bobby, so it must be the same child. But when she sends him to play with the neighborhood kids, they don't recognize Bobby either. The boy lived with the Dunbars for the rest of his life, went on to have a family of his own, and passed away in 1966. And almost 100 years after this took place, Bobby Dunbar's granddaughters insisted a DNA test be done. And it proved what they feared to be true. The boy was Bruce Anderson. He shared no DNA with the Dunbar family. It turns out part of the reason he was not reunited with his real mother was there was a rumor that Bruce Anderson's mother was a prostitute and was not viewed favorably by the police. For more creepy history, make sure you're following along.
This woman reported her ex to police, and less than an hour later she was dead. Frideline Daniel was a 34-year-old mother from Florida. On the 8th of November 2023, she filed a police report against her ex. Her ex was Robens Caesar, aged 41. She told police how he had been harassing her. Her family state that on the Wednesday morning when she was dropping her daughter off at school, he had been following her. She did exactly what anyone would have advised. She went straight to the police station and reported this. Less than an hour later, though, the unthinkable happened. As Fridolin arrived back at her apartment complex just prior to 9 a.m, her ex was waiting for her. Fridolin was actually with her aunt at this point, and her aunt heard her say, "Oh, did you bring a gun to kill me?" Neighbours heard loud gunshots, and when police arrived, they found the woman deceased. Her ex's black Honda was seen leaving the area by witnesses. He then allegedly confessed to police. He reportedly said that the pair had split up and she was refusing to get back with him. He allegedly told police that her reporting him to the police was the final straw. He is now obviously facing a first-degree murder charge.
This is how it ends for us. The last words that Heather Wood heard on the phone with her estranged husband Christopher before he shot their daughter Ava before turning the gun on himself. Heather and Christopher were separated at the time and not living together. They'd previously had 2 incidents that involved the police, one for stalking and one for aggravated harassment. The couple's 14-year-old daughter Ava was an avid soccer player. She absolutely loved her friends and was described by teachers as an all-round athlete. She was an honest student and the teachers loved having her in class. On January 19, 2023, Ava was staying at her dad's, but Heather had received a worrying phone call. Christopher had previously shown signs of depression, and he said on the phone, "This is how it ends for us." She never for 1 second imagined that Christopher would hurt Ava, but when Ava didn't show up for school the next day, Heather phoned 911 and asked them to do a welfare check. Ava and Christopher were both found in separate rooms in the house, with gunshot wounds to their heads. Christopher's was self-inflicted. Ava's family and friends and everybody in the community has obviously been left absolutely shocked and heartbroken. Ava's death was senseless and completely unnecessary.
I went ghost hunting on the Titanic and it was terrifying. Well, technically I didn't actually go down to the wreck of the Titanic, but I did go to the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Inside of the museum, they have hundreds of objects recovered from the wreck of the Titanic, and they've recreated parts of the ship. So while I was inside of the museum, I asked one of the workers if she's ever experienced anything paranormal. And she told me that people see all sorts of entities within the museum. They see the spirits of a little boy, they see an evil-looking man in one of the areas, and they even see a headless woman. Now, the assumption is that these spirits come from the objects that were recovered from the wreck of the Titanic. Here are a couple highlights of the evidence that I captured. At one point, I got the words "can't breathe" on one of my devices, which obviously led me to believe that it might have been somebody who drowned during the wreck. In another room, I also got the name Raymond. And when I Googled Raymond the Titanic, there were actually 2 passengers named Raymond that were on board. Sadly, one of the Raymonds made it out alive, and the other died with the ship. The museum has a seriously spooky atmosphere throughout. It almost reminded me of an old haunted house attraction with the way some of the rooms were designed. But while I was there in the museum, I made connection with so many other spirits. It's such a crazy video. If you want to watch it, it's on YouTube right here. Just look up my channel, The Paranormal Files. And I'm also going to put the link to the video in the bio of my TikTok.
This is the youngest ever death row inmate, Krista Pike. When she was just 18 years old, Krista became jealous of a fellow classmate that she thought was trying to steal her boyfriend Tadaryl Shipp. Along with Tadaryl and her friend Shadola Peterson, she came up with a plan to lure this girl to an abandoned steam plant near their university campus. They told Colleen Slemmer to meet them there as they wanted to make peace and offer her some drugs. When she arrived, Krista and her boyfriend attacked Colleen while Shadola kept lookout. For 30 horrific minutes, Colleen was tortured, taunted and beaten, and Krista actually carved a pentagram in her chest while she was still alive. Finally, Krista picked up a piece of asphalt from the ground and smashed it down over Colleen's head, killing her. She then kept a piece of Colleen's skull and was apparently showing it off at school the next day. Within 36 hours, Krista, Tadaryl and Shadola were all arrested. Their university logbook showed that they left with Colleen, but returned without her, and the piece of skull that Krista kept was found in her jacket pocket. Krista soon confessed, but she said that they hadn't intended on killing Colleen, and that they just wanted to scare her, but it got out of control. Krista was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, and she was found guilty on both counts. On March 30th, 1996, she was sentenced to death by electrocution. Tadaryl received a life sentence with the possibility of parole, and Shadola received probation for pleading guilty to being an accessory after the fact. Krista is now 47 and is still on death row in Tennessee, awaiting execution.
Following a horrific viral video, this woman was murdered. Transgender woman Malaysia Booker was just 22 when she was killed. Her horrific death occurred on the 18th of May 2019. Police were called to an incident on Valley Glen Drive in northeastern Dallas at around 6:40 a.m. They found the victim lying face down, deceased from homicidal violence. She didn't have any ID with her at the time, so she was identified the next day. Now, the victim had actually gone viral the month prior as part of a horrific video circulating on the internet. She was violently attacked by a group of males in the car park of an apartment complex on April the 12th, 2019. Now, the incident started with something fairly minor. Malaysia was accused of reversing into somebody's car. She was viciously attacked and a crowd gathered, and rather than get the woman the help that she needed, they started videoing. The video started circulating on social media, and Malaysia suffered from concussion and a fractured wrist. Now, Edward Thomas, the man who attacked her, was charged with aggravated assault and held in Dallas County Jail. He was actually convicted of a lesser charge later on of misdemeanor assault and given 300 days in prison. After surviving the attack, Malaysia spoke out about violence against the transgender community. Just a month later, she was dead. After she was found deceased from a gunshot wound, Kendrell Lyles was arrested and charged with her murder, as well as 2 other killings. Police stated that Malaysia was seen getting into a light-coloured Lincoln, matching the description of Kendrell's car. Police also examined phone records which showed he was in the area at the time. He's been sentenced to 48 years for that killing. Shockingly, he's also charged with shooting Letitia Grant, aged 35, just 4 days after Malaysia's murder. He's also charged with killing Kenneth Kichoki the day after.
This man, Ronnie McNutt, went on Facebook Live and live streamed his own death. So this is Ronnie McNutt. And on August 31st, 2020, this 33-year-old started a Facebook live stream. Now, Ronnie was a military veteran. He had served time in the United States Army Reserve and had spent time in Iraq. At the time of his death, Ronnie actually worked at a Toyota plant in Mississippi, but he suffered from a number of mental health conditions like depression and PTSD. The PTSD being a direct consequence of his time served in Iraq. So shortly before his death, Ronnie had broken up with his girlfriend, which caused him to spiral. And it was a combination of all of these mental health disorders and recent events in the world that led Ronnie to start that stream. So at the beginning, the stream seemed pretty normal. And one friend named Joshua Steen joined in to see what Ronnie was up to. But he became alarmed when he noticed that Ronnie was visibly intoxicated and holding a gun. So during this stream, multiple people tried to reach out to Facebook to get them to cut off the stream. But it wasn't until hours after Ronnie had taken his own life when Facebook responded with this callous message, stating they had worked with experts to figure out how to best help Ronnie and that the post would remain on Facebook, even though it depicted the gruesome death of Ronnie. So in the stream, everybody's talking to Ronnie, trying to convince him to not do what he's about to do, but at one point he receives a phone call from his ex-girlfriend. They argued over the phone, then she ended the call on Ronnie, and that's when he looked at the audience that was watching on Facebook, said, "Hey guys, I guess that's it," aimed his rifle under his chin and took his own life. Now, the police had already been called and were at Ronnie's apartment, but for some reason they had waited until they heard the gunshot to enter his home. And tragically, immediately after Ronnie took his life, his phone started buzzing, people were calling him, and as officers searched his home, his phone continued to ring. A final message that Ronnie had left people on Facebook was discovered after his death. And it read, "Someone in your life needs to know that they matter, that they are loved, that they have a future. Be the one to tell them." In a really disturbing twist though, users actually screen recorded the video and started uploading it to all sorts of social media platforms. And it kept popping up everywhere on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and yes, on TikTok. And all these platforms were very slow to remove the videos. Literally only a few days after Ronnie took his own life, the hashtag Ronnie McNutt had over 15.6 million views here on TikTok. And I have to say, the people that were uploading these videos trying to expose people to this horrific material are disgusting. This is a really tragic, sad story, and I hope that Ronnie is in a better place now.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
When officers arrived at this crime scene, they noticed something odd. A camera crew arrived to film a true crime series, and some said nothing looked like it should have looked. Victoria Rickman was a 30-year-old divorced mother. She was in a relationship with Will Carter Jr., who was also 30. The pair were said to have been in a couple for around 3 years, and they both had children. Victoria had a son and Will had a daughter. Now, things between the pair were extremely volatile. However, it was the 13th of September 2013 when things turned extremely dark. Police received a frantic phone call in the early hours of the morning, and it was Victoria. Shockingly, she told police that she had killed her partner. She told them that he had been SAing her and she was left with no choice but to shoot him to get him off. This was actually not the first time that Victoria claimed that Will had assaulted her. She told friends and family of disturbing events when Will had apparently arred her and abused her. However, Will's family had an entirely opposite narrative. Will had opened up to his friends and family about Victoria's abuse. She'd reportedly threatened and physically assaulted him on numerous occasions. Will's dad told detectives that on one occasion a year prior, Will had showed up to his dad's house bleeding. Victoria had apparently hit him in the head with a hammer and bit him. Will's dad recalled saying to Will, "If she'd had a gun, she'd have killed you." As well as this, 4 months prior to Will's death, Victoria was actually arrested and charged with battery. These charges were pending at the time of Will's killing. When police showed up to the crime scene on the 13th of September, they noticed something very odd. There were no signs of a struggle at all. After the picture had been painted of a vicious assault and a self-defense shooting, officers expected multiple injuries on both parties. Will's gunshot wounds were the only wounds he had. There were no signs of a fight, and tellingly, police stated it seemed that Will was not even facing her when she shot him. Police did not buy Victoria's claims of self-defense, and they arrested her and charged her with Will's murder. Interestingly, video cameras from a reality true crime series were filming as events unfolded. Investigators looked into some forensics from the scene. They noted that there was blood spatter on the back wall and it was quite high up. This indicated that the victim had to have been standing up. Very interestingly, the gun that Victoria had actually used was given to her by a law enforcement officer. The officer, Rick Price, had given this to her a few months prior to the killing. She'd apparently told him that she was afraid and he gave her one of his personal guns. He even apparently took her to a gun shooting range to practice. He did admit that he was romantically interested in Victoria at this time. Eventually, Victoria was given life without parole for the murder.
These are missing person cases you probably never heard of. This is Yelena Carisi, born July 26, 1970. She was touring Central America and North America when she arrived in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1993. She had gone with her parents on a trip to the city, then decided to stay after the vacation was over and her parents returned to Italy. At first, she traveled to Florida, left a few days later after telling her parents she feared 2 men in Florida who were trying to drug her and kill her. She then traveled to Belize and Mexico before going back to New Orleans. Yelena, who speaks fluent English, immersed herself in the street culture there and kept company with street musicians and homeless people. She painted and took notes about the people she met, stating she planned to write a book, possibly a novel about her experiences. Her father believes she may have been using drugs during this period. At the time of her disappearance, Yelena was staying in the Ladeo, a cheap hotel on the 700th block of St. Charles Avenue, 5 blocks from the French Quarter, with Alexander Muscala, a street musician who was 54 and performed in several countries in Europe. She checked in on December 31st, the week before she disappeared. Alexander said they slept in separate beds during the time they shared the hotel room, and she refused any sexual relationship with him in spite of his urgings. He had a history of drug use and sexual violence, as well as a reputation as a guru. Yelena seemed fascinated by him. She referred to him as my master and said he had opened completely new intellectual horizons for her. Yelena was last seen in the city's French Quarter area on January 6, 1994. Her parents, who last heard from her on New Year's Day, reported her missing on January 18th. They traveled to Louisiana shortly afterwards to assist in the search efforts. No evidence regarding Yelena's whereabouts was discovered. Most of her personal belongings, including her passport, backpack, clothing, camera, luggage, and notebooks, were left behind at the hotel, which is just weird. Alexander showed Yelena's passport to the hotel staff after her disappearance and attempted to use the traveler's checks to pay for the bill for their room. but the checks were refused because they weren't signed and he was evicted. He told the police he did not know Yelena's whereabouts but believed she was alright. He was arrested on January 31st after a former girlfriend claimed he had raped her, but was released for lack of evidence after less than 2 weeks. The only possible lead was a security guard who said he saw a woman jump into the Mississippi River at 11:30 p.m. on January 6th, the last day she was seen. Prior to jumping, the woman was acting strangely and said, "I belong in the water." She swam for about 100 yards and began to struggle against the current in the wake from a passing boat, then screamed for help and sank. She fit Yelena's general physical description and was wearing similar clothes, but they weren't identical. It has never been established that that person was in fact Yelena, but many authorities in New Orleans believe it was her. Not everyone believes Yelena is dead, however. No trace of her remains were found in the river, but it's possible she was washed into the Gulf of Mexico and out to sea. Since January 1994, there has been many reported sightings of her in the United States, and even Italy and some places in Europe, even more than a decade after her disappearance. None of the sightings have been confirmed, and Yelena continues to be listed as a missing person.
This schoolboy stabbed his teacher to death in front of a classroom full of students. 61-year-old Anne Maguire was a Spanish teacher teaching in Leeds. She'd actually worked at the school for 40 years and she was only 5 months off retirement. However, in April 2014, something absolutely horrific happened. One of her students was 15-year-old Will Cornick. He'd always been described as a smart student who never really caused any trouble. Classmates regarded him as a polite student, but after he got diagnosed with diabetes, his personality seemed to change. In 2013, he tried to join the army, but because of his diagnosis, he was rejected. Being in the army had been his dream, so this was really upsetting for him. After failing to complete his Spanish homework, he was given detention by Anne. He also expressed a wish to her that he wanted to drop Spanish, but she wouldn't let him, which only angered him more. He began to develop a deep-rooted grudge against Anne. Shockingly, he reportedly messaged his friends on Facebook asking if one of them would kill her for him for £10. During one school day, halfway through his Spanish class, Will decided to get up and attack Anne with a knife. The classmates watched on in horror as he chased her out of the classroom. When there, another teacher heard her screams and tried to shield Anne from any more blows from him. Will then allegedly returned to his class and told his classmates how it was a shame that he hadn't killed her. However, Anne did actually pass away from her injuries. Will later admitted that he did plan also to kill 2 other teachers. One of them was actually pregnant at the time. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. This is the disturbing case of the child who killed a child. In July 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was abducted from her bed. She'd been staying with her grandparents in the Isle of Bute. She'd gone to sleep watching Peppa Pig and no one had any idea of the horrors that would unfold that evening. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Aaron Campbell was drinking with friends at his house. Aaron apparently became upset in the night because he had been arguing with his mum. He had had a challenging upbringing involving physical and emotional abuse. Aaron decided that evening he wanted to get some substances to smoke from a couple that he knew. The couple in question were Alicia's dad, Robert, and his girlfriend. They'd been known to sell substances to Aaron previously, but he could not get hold of them. Intending to go and steal them off them, Aaron armed himself with a knife. He headed to Robert's house where he lived with his parents and girlfriend. This was obviously where Alicia was staying that evening. When he arrived at the house, he noticed the 6-year-old sleeping in her bed and took the opportunity to snatch the poor defenseless young child. Disgustingly, he carried her to a secluded location, SA'd her and then killed her. He then disposed of his clothes in the sea. At 6 a.m. the next day, Alicia's grandparents woke up to discover that the little girl was missing. They straight away alerted police and locals. When the family asked Aaron to keep an eye out for the little girl, he texted them back saying, "Oh damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." A local man soon discovered Alicia's lifeless body around 15 minutes away from her house. Along with a lot of the local community, Aaron's mum actually checked her CCTV of her house. She was hoping that this would help with the investigation, and it definitely did. She saw her son leaving and returning from the house that night, and she handed the evidence over to police. Aaron was arrested, and it was discovered that the clothes that he'd abandoned on the beach did actually match with his DNA. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.